Good evening, everybody. It's actually morning. Good morning, everybody. It is Saturday morning. This is Radio Free Mormon. I am here with you for my April 2025 LDS General Conference Post-Mortem, where I watch all 5 sessions of General Conference so you don't have to. I just got done watching the morning session, Saturday morning session, General Conference. It was 2 hours. It was jam-packed. There's actually quite a bit to talk about in this session of General Conference. So I'm going to try and keep it to a minimum. But first, a few words of introduction. I have done this as the post-mortem for several years now. I'm going to continue to call it that, but I want to do this more like a telethon today, if that's okay with everybody. Because every year when I was a kid, I used to look forward to Labor Day. It was the only thing I looked forward to about Labor Day because school was about to start, and I dreaded that, of course. But at least right before school started, there was Labor Day, a 3-day weekend. And in that weekend was the Jerry Lewis Labor Day Telethon, where it would be Jerry Lewis and all of his friends that you could get to come and perform. But they would start around, I think it was Sunday, late afternoon, evening that they would start. They'd go all night and then they'd end sometime late afternoon on Monday. And Jerry Lewis would sing When You Walk Through the Storm. And they try and raise money to find the cure for muscular dystrophy. And so that was a big part of my childhood growing up. And I thought maybe we'll just go ahead and we'll do that here today. Sorry, I was just looking down at a text message, which was from Rebecca Biblioteca asking, are you ready to rumble? Answer, oh yeah. Thanks, Rebecca, for checking in. Okay, so what I want to do tonight or this morning is instead of a bank of people on phones that you call in to a certain number to donate, instead, all you have to do is go to radiofreemormon.org and click the donate button. If you can make it a monthly donation, so much the better. If it's a one-time donation, that's great too. Anything that you can donate as we strive here at Radio Free Mormon to find the cure for Mormonism. So that's what your donations are going to during this General Conference Telethon, the Radio Free Mormon General Conference Telethon, trying to find the cure for Mormonism. Won't you help? All right. So now here we go. Radio Free Mormon watching General Conference so you don't have to. 2 big things I'm looking for in this General Conference, and I want to bring them up here and at the beginning of each session. Demonic possession should be brought up by somebody in General Conference, specifically that if you think your kid is possessed by a demon, don't kill your kid, okay? That has to be brought up in some way in General Conference, because otherwise it's too horrible to think about. There are Mormon kids who are being killed, and they're in the news. It's not like people don't know about this, right? They're being killed, they're being tortured. There are horrible things are happening to them by parents who are members of the church who think these kids are possessed by demons. So I want the leadership to call that out and say, don't do that. That's wrong. At a minimum, that's wrong. Don't do that. Will that be addressed at all is my question. Not in the first session of General Conference, not in the Saturday morning session, it wasn't addressed. And the second thing is that Elder Renlund, a week or so ago, gave a talk in another forum where he hinted strongly that something big is coming for women in the LDS church. Now, it's within the bounds the Lord has prescribed, so don't get all, expecting something big. I expect it won't be that impressive. I'm ready to be underimpressed, but I'm looking for it to see if it's going to show up here in General Conference, because a lot of people think that was a hint that something's coming in General Conference. And maybe Elder Renlund will talk about it. He didn't talk in the Saturday morning session, but I'm keeping my eye open for that as well. All right, now to the conference itself. Let me go back here and just check, make sure everything's going okay. It looks like I'm going live. It looks like I've been live for 4 minutes. It looks like 175 people are watching. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I'm a bit busy here. It's just me. Bill is doing some stuff behind the scenes remotely, and thank you so much for that, Bill. But I'm not able to check out the live chat from here. So I appreciate it. I hope you're having a great time in the live chat. I saw that some people had started live chatting even before the conference session had started, much less before I came on. So have fun there, and I will have a chance maybe at some point to go back and review the live chat because that's always a lot of fun. Elder Oaks, Dallin H. Oaks, is presiding. He is, he's kind of old. He's up, he's walking. At least he's there. He's going to the lectern, and I think that's something to be admired. He kind of shambled to the pulpit, but he made it there. Nonetheless, President Nelson, on the other hand, not present. Saturday morning session, President Nelson is viewing from home, according to Dallin Oaks, who also assures us that President Nelson has asked Dallin Oaks to preside. Come ye children of the Lord opens, and songs of praise after Elder Oaks talks. Those are the songs that the Tabernacle choir sings. All right, opening prayer given by Elder Kevin S. Hamilton. And by the way, now Elder Oaks gets up again. He sits down, opening prayer given, and now he gets back up. There was a very long period of waiting. It seemed almost awkward, where we were waiting for Elder Oaks to get up to approach. But I'm wondering if, you see, I've got this screen where I'm taking down notes, so I can't always watch everything that's happening. But I did notice later that Elder Oaks is using the chair at the lectern. So maybe that was being put in place while he was waiting to stand up. Maybe that's what happened. It's a big black bar stool with a back. It's a backed bar stool that they have now put at the lectern for those members of the GAs or whoever. I've only seen men use it, who are very old and they don't want to stand there during the whole time they're talking. So they've got this nice chair they can sort of sit on, and it kind of looks like they're standing. So it's a bar stool. I believe he was using that. Maybe that had something to do with the delay. They got right into the presentation and sustaining of leaders. That came right off the top on Saturday morning. Now, Elder Oaks did it. Of course, he made sure that he told everybody that if you have any problem with any of these presentation and church leaders, then you don't feel like you can sustain them, then you need to talk to your stake president. I didn't hear any opposition. I listened closely. I didn't hear any. Once again, I suspect they have baffled this place. They have baffles in it so that the sound from the audience doesn't get to the microphone. But still, if someone yelled loud enough, you'd think you'd hear it. I didn't hear anything. Also, on this general conference, when they're reading off the names of the apostles, they actually panned across them. The camera pans across them as they're reading the names. And I've got to tell you, it's quite a rogues gallery at this point. It's a rogues gallery of apostles. But they all got sustained, so that's good news. New Young Men's General Presidency, Brad Wilcox is out. He's out of there. So, they released everybody who was in it. He was a counselor in the Young Men's Presidency, and then they reconstituted it without him. And apparently he's in limbo now. He's a free agent. We'll see what happens to Brad Wilcox as time goes on. Then the church auditing report for 2024, the prior year. This cat named Jared B. Larson, who's supposed to be the manager of the auditing department, he gets up there and it's the same old blah, 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 blah. Nothing. There's nothing that he's saying except that, the church does so good with its money and everything is fine and we've checked, okay? So take our word for it. Now, you know how I can tell that the church auditing department is in the tank for the church and how what they say has no meaning whatsoever, because they wouldn't say something was wrong if they found something wrong. But here's the first way, okay? They always say the same thing. They never find anything. This is the auditing department that never found anything. This is the gang that couldn't shoot straight. Everything is always fine when it comes to general conference announcements. That's how you can tell they're in the tank. And the other way you can tell they're in the tank, by the way, please remember that as you've been sitting through general conference, year after year after year after year after year, and you look back over the last 20 years, the last 25 years, and you remember every time they trotted out this little manager for the church auditing department to read the same statement that everything's fine in the church and its finances, remember, they were saying the exact same thing during the entire 20 years that the SEC scandal was going on before it broke. It was going on for 20 years. And for all those 20 years, so 20 times 2, because conference is twice a year. So that's 40 times they had one of these managers go up to the microphone and basically look at us and lie to us and tell us that everything was fine with the church finances. And on top of that, remember, let it not be forgotten that on 2 separate occasions during these 20 years, it was the church auditing department that told the church this thing you're doing with all these shell companies, with the SEC and the 13F shell companies, you have 13 of them, that's against the law. And if the government finds out about that, they're not going to be happy. But every time, nevertheless, even after that happened, they still came to the pulpit and they still looked at us in general conference and said, everything's fine with the finances of the church. That's how you can tell these guys are in the tank and really they're nothing but a bunch of hacks. All right, so now we get to the next speaker, Jeff Holland. Jeffrey Holland gets to speak first. He's frequently the first speaker in general conference, I've noticed. He, of course, is getting older. He's wearing glasses now to read off the teleprompter. And what he does in his talk is he hits some New Testament and Book of Mormon verses about how we have to become as a child in order to enter into the kingdom of heaven. He talks about the innocence of children. And here I thought, I mean, he really is talking about the innocence of children. You have to become as a child to enter into the kingdom of heaven. And, you know, the King Benjamin speech and all that stuff, all the stuff about children and how precious and innocent they are. And I actually thought, is it going to happen now? Is Elder Holland going to talk about how we need to protect our children, sometimes from their parents, sometimes from other church members who think that maybe they're demonically possessed? No, he didn't go there. He did not talk about that because children are precious. They're just not precious enough to save, I guess. Yeah, he was sitting. Oh, you know, it was Jeff Holland. Excuse me. I have to go back. This is live, so forgive me, but it was Jeff Holland, I believe, who was sitting on the black back bar stool at the lectern. So it wasn't Elder Oak. So then I guess I've got no reason I can think of as to why it took him so long to get up there. Elder Holland continues to talk about how children love so easily and they forgive so readily. Yeah, they're so easy to take advantage of, and they're so easy to harm if you think that they are demonically possessed. But he's not going to tell people not to kill their children or to try and exorcise demons from them, as has been going on in the Mormon church recently. He tells this story now, and this is a tragic story. It's about a little fellow, a young man, 12 years old, who earlier this year, on January 5th, 2025, was ordained to the Aaronic priesthood and, had the Aaronic priesthood conferred upon him. It's important to use the correct terminology. And he was ordained a deacon. Now, Easton Darren Jolly, this young 12-year-old, he has some real challenges in life. And I'm talking about muscular dystrophy. Elder Holland tells us that he has muscular dystrophy. Of course, he's had it for his life. And he's in a wheelchair, although sometimes apparently he can get out of his wheelchair. But, you know, he has difficulty walking. He has muscular dystrophy. And so what he wants to do, and what Elder Holland is going to tell us about, is the first time that this young man, this young 12-year-old with muscular dystrophy, passed the sacrament in his ward. And that's why he says he had longed to pass the sacrament, this young man, but he was scared he would fail, that he would fall, that he would be teased. The picture he shows of this young man, he is in a wheelchair. He actually does have muscular dystrophy, which was just this crazy coincidence because I had already decided last night I was going to do this like the Jerry Lewis telethon. And then I find out in the first talk, he's talking about a kid who actually does have muscular dystrophy. And his life was filled with formidable challenges, of course, while shattering his hopes and dreams for the future. At this point, I was furiously taking down the words that Elder Holland was talking about because, look, this is a tragic story, and I wish nothing but the best for Easton Jolly, but it's muscular dystrophy, and it's a horrible disease. It's horrible for him. It's horrible for his family. So I don't want to take away from that or sound like I'm mocking in any way, because I am not. But I have to look at these words and go, where is the priesthood in all of this? The priesthood that the LDS church claims the apostles have, that basically all the men in the church have, as long as they're righteous enough and old enough. And that's 12 years old, by the way. But when you get to be 18, you can become an elder, get the Melchizedek priesthood. You've got the power to give priesthood blessings, to heal people. All the apostles have this power. I have this power. That's how much it's disseminated in the church. There's a lay priesthood in the church. And yet, nobody mentions, at least Elder Holland does not mention, the idea of giving this young man a priesthood blessing so that he could be healed. The strange thing that's going on is that Elder Holland is a leader in a church that has this priesthood. This is a big deal in the Mormon church, the priesthood, to perform the ordinances of salvation and exaltation, and the priesthood to heal. And yet, Elder Holland speaks of this young man and his tragic disease as if it's a fait accompli. Everything is going to happen the way it's going to happen to anybody who has this horrible disease, regardless of priesthood blessings, which seemed like kind of a disconnect. It's a common disconnect we see in the church, proclaiming the priesthood to heal people, but then also talking as if there really isn't any priesthood to heal people. So these are some of the words, and I got them as close as I could to what Elder Holland was saying, that this young man, that this disease has filled his life with formidable challenges while shattering his hopes and dreams for the future. He will soon be in a wheelchair permanently. This is what Elder Hoax is saying. I mean, there's no hope for this kid. He will soon be in a wheelchair permanently, and his family doesn't talk about what awaits him after that. That's what Elder Holland said. Elder Holland talks like a man who is an apostle in a church that has no priesthood power to heal. And that's what I said. I said, we're the freak, except I didn't say freak when I wrote it down. Where the freak is the priesthood to heal this wonderful kid. So, Easton, this young man, made his family promise not to help him when he's passing the sacrament because it's going to be difficult. He wants to do it on his own. He goes up to the stand. Now, the stand in this ward is apparently up 3 steps where you have to walk to get the sacrament tray to start passing. He's not in a wheelchair at this point. He's walking, obviously. But he has to make his way up the stairs to the stand to get his priesthood tray, which he does laboriously up the 3 steps. And then we find out his dad's the bishop because he's the one who goes and gives the sacrament to his father, the bishop. It's a touching story. I just wish there was some priesthood in this church to heal this kid. This is a story that tells us that there are those who have been, this is a story that tells us also that there are those who have so much less than we and who suffer so much more than we and who have so much bigger challenges than we have, who nevertheless are faithful, so that we will be impressed to do the same because our difficulties and challenges are less than those of this young 12-year-old. If he can do it, so can we, damn it. Then Elder Holland testifies, oh my gosh, he did it. Then Elder Holland testified that he knows the priesthood is real. Who writes this? And restoring his life. Because Elder Holland had kind of a close shave not too long ago in the hospital. It was touch and go. But he made it. He's out. He's at General Conference. God bless him. But to have told this story about this young man, Easton, and then to say that he testifies that he knows the priesthood is real and restoring his, Elder Holland's, life. What about Easton, I wrote? Is there no priesthood left to restore his life? It was a little bit tone deaf there. Okay, so that's Elder Holland. Going on to President Camille Johnson, the Relief Society General President. Her message is this. It actually is a good follow-up to Elder Holland's message because what she's doing is going to give a rationale. I don't know that it's an original rationale, but it's a rationale for why it is that nobody gets healed in this church, in spite of the priesthood. All right? We've got emotional. There's 3 kinds of healing, right? There's emotional healing, which you can definitely tell if you're emotionally healed, right? Because you don't feel emotionally distraught or whatever it is anymore that you're feeling emotionally. There's physical healing. And of course, we can tell if we're physically healed because we don't hurt anymore, right? And then there's spiritual healing. Okay? Spiritual healing through the atonement. So what Camille does is she takes those 3 types of healings and says, the spiritual healing you can get right now by praying to Jesus and drawing near to him and doing all the things you're supposed to do as a good Mormon. However, President Camille Johnson says that the emotional healing and the physical healing, you may have to wait for that. And you may have to wait a long time because it's up to God when he's going to do that. He'll do the spiritual stuff that you cannot see right away. But the mental stuff that you can feel, the physical stuff that you can definitely see, that's going to take a little longer. In fact, it may take as long as till after you die for that stuff to get healed. But that is her framework. That's her model. And that's how she can justify believing in the God who heals, and yet all around her are people who aren't getting healed. It's rather tragic. It's ironic that Camille Johnson would be giving this lesson. She draws a distinction between spiritually healed and physically healed. Her message seems to be that Jesus will heal us spiritually immediately, but the physical part will probably have to wait until the next life when all things will be made whole. The stuff we can see doesn't happen, but the stuff we can't see, that happens immediately. She lists all of these mental issues, and I didn't get them all down, but a whole series of mental issues, and then says that kind of healing is on the Lord's time, just like the physical healing. Then I wrote, this talk is a concession speech to the power of the priesthood. It's a concession speech on the power of the priesthood. There is no priesthood power in the LDS church. God will get around to it when he feels like it, that healing on the mental and physical issues. The priesthood need not apply. Something interesting was that Camille Johnson, I believe, used a gender neutral version of the scripture. She was quoting from Matthew. She was quoting that passage about, so let your light shine before, don't put your light under a bushel, but set it on a candlestick, right? From Matthew. And I was listening to her, and I was kind of quoting it in my head like I do a lot of times when they're quoting scriptures. She used, instead of all men, she used the expression, this people. Okay, so here's my notes. She quotes the light on the candlestick line about not under a bushel, but instead of saying, therefore, let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven. She said, still quoting though, let your light so shine before this people, not before all men. There may be a footnote when it comes out in the Liahona to that, but I noticed that. So interestingly, that LDS church leaders, specifically the Relief Society General President, is using a gender neutral version of Matthew in this quote. Instead of saying all men, she says this people. Baby steps down the street. This is of some interest. The church is now introducing gender neutral language into the scriptures being read in general conference. I'm not sure this is the first time this has happened. There might have been a time recently, but it's a new thing. So ultimately, she concludes with the thought she began with, which is her thesis: we can be spiritually whole while we wait for emotional and physical healing. All right, so I'm going to break in right now just to remind you that we're having the telethon, that this is not the Jerry Lewis Labor Day telethon. This is the Radio Free Mormon General Conference telethon, where we're trying to raise money to cure Mormonism. So if you will, go to radiofreemormon.org, make a donation today. If you can make a continuing donation, a monthly donation, great. One-time donation is great too. Thank you so much. With your help together, we will find a cure for Mormonism. All right, now we get to the next talk. Elder Ronald Rasband. He's always nice to see. He's always kind of a smiling, kind of a cheery sort of fellow. He quotes Elder Nelson, President Nelson. I think he quotes him 3 times. He's really kind of a suck-up when it comes to that. But the first quote from Elder Nelson is, the Lord is indeed hastening his work. It's going to be a hastening his work kind of talk. The second coming crackpots are going to have a field day with this talk. They're going to take this talk, they're going to put it up on their channel, and they'll get tens of thousands of views with a thumbnail saying that Elder Rasband is saying that Jesus is coming back really soon. Now, Elder Rasband quotes Joseph Smith about the church filling North and South America and filling the world. We all remember that quote. The church is growing in members and missionaries and meeting houses and temples and everywhere, he tells us. Really? I know about the temples. Meeting houses, I think, are shrinking. I think they're closing them. That's what I'm hearing. And missionaries, I think they're fudging the numbers to make them look bigger than they are. And members, I don't think that's growing. I know you've got numbers, but let's just say I'm suspicious of those numbers, Elder Rasband. This is a throwback to the old idea from when I joined the church, that the growing church, the church growing, proves that it's true. Okay? The fact that the church is growing proves it's true. It's not only Daniel chapter 2, which is usually and frequently quoted in connection with this, but also this quote from Joseph Smith about how the church is going to fill the world. Well, it's got to grow to do that. Therefore, it's got to grow not only to fulfill Daniel's prophecy, but also to fulfill Joseph Smith's prophecy, which is a big reason why the church seems to want to fudge numbers to make it look like they're growing even when they're not. This is a throwback to the old idea that the growing church proves it true, but it is not growing. This is the big lie, I think. There are 367 temples in various stages from announced to completed. 367 temples. Do we really need those many temples? That's one way the church is growing. Nobody can deny that. We got more temples than Carter has little pills. And we also got more money than God. But other than those two ways, I'm not sure the church really is growing. This is the talk that Elder Rasband is giving, and we get one at least once every general conference about how well the church is doing, how great the church is doing. This is like the state of the church kind of speech instead of the state of the nation. In every category, Elder Rasband tells us that the church is bigger and better than it has ever been in its history. But he says there are those who struggle. We actually get a little footnote here in his talk. He does mention briefly those who struggle, who have faith challenges and doubts that seem to have no answer. Well, those who never come back to the church who are in that category, they will end up being footnotes in history. Yes. Elder Rasband called us footnotes in history. Well, as Rebecca Biblioteca pointed out, that's ironic because the footnotes are where you usually go to find out the truth. That's where the truth is, in the footnotes. So I can live with that. I'll be a footnote for you, Elder Rasband, anytime. Oh, yeah. We are the world. We are the footnotes. That's our song. That's where the truth is found, baby, in the footnotes. Now, I think he said this before. There's this inane ending. I think he said it before. If he hasn't said it before, somebody else has, because I remember mocking it before. But what he says is, for those with doubts and questions, Jesus Christ is the answer. And that's kind of all he says. He doesn't go anywhere with it, because if you take that a step further, you realize how ridiculous that concept is, that Jesus Christ is the answer to any questions that members of the church may be having. So let's just give a few examples of this, all right? Why did Joseph Smith marry so many women? Answer, Jesus Christ. Well, Elder Rasband said he's the answer to everything, so that must be the answer to that question. Why did the church, the Mormon church, not let black people into the temple until 1978? Answer, according to Elder Rasband, Jesus Christ. Here's another question. Why did the church engage in fraudulent behavior with the United States government to keep the public from knowing how much money the church had in the U.S. stock market? That's a question a lot of people have. Answer, according to Elder Rasband, Jesus. And more recently, why did Joseph Smith use the Adam Clark Bible commentary in composing the Book of Mormon? Say it with me now. The answer is Jesus Christ. You knew it. All right, that's the end of his talk. The choir is going to sing, and did sing actually, High on the Mountain Top. That's a great song. It's a great hymn. I memorized that on my mission. I like that so much. I remember texting somebody in the Tabernacle Choir Eyring conference. The men are wearing matching ties with paisley on them, and I texted, Paisley. Why did it have to be paisley? And there was a response, but I won't tell you what that was. Now, the next speaker is going to be Quentin L. Crook. Cook, excuse me, Quentin L. Cook from the Quorum of the 12 Apostles. And I thought, am I the only one who thinks Elder Cook is starting to look like Bob the Tomato from VeggieTales? Just a question. This is the talk now about the pioneers. He is going to go on and on. This is the Willie Martin Handcart Company talk about how they did all this stuff and their faith and how they suffered. Boy, did they suffer. And a lot of them died in making the trek out to Salt Lake City. And yeah, it was awful. This is invoking this story once again in a typically general conference kind of way in order to, I guess, encourage us to greater feats. Once again, some people have challenging illnesses. Other people have huge challenging journeys in the snow to try and get to Zion, and they suffer and they die and they get caught in the snow and there's starvation and it's just horrible. But a lot of them still make it, okay? And that's what we're supposed to do as well, by implication, through the storms and the horrors of our life. That was horrors of our life, by the way. He talks about the challenges they faced at the Sweetwater River and all these other places. He's talking about it in connection with his being asked to go and dedicate a temple that was out there. But that's sort of just the reason to talk about the Handcart Company. Now, what Elder Cook does not tell us, and we all know he's not going to tell us the other side of the story about the Handcart Company, don't we? Although he should. If he's going to bring it up, he should bring up the whole story about the Handcart Company. What Elder Cook doesn't tell us is that they, in the Handcart Company, they were starting very late. They're starting in August, not even in early August. To get across the plains, it usually takes about 111 days, and that's not handcart. That's by regular wagon. In August, September, October, they're going to be there so late. It's so dangerous. But they were told it would be okay by leaders of the church. They were promised they would be okay. And it was okay for them to get started now. And the non-Mormon leader of the company, his name was Savage, I believe. He told them not to go. It's too late. Wait till next year. But when they insisted, because their leaders were telling them that they would be fine, he says, okay, I'll go with you. I will lead you. He said he would go along too. Now, this next part is from Wikipedia about the Willie Martin Handcart Company, okay? If you want to know a little bit about the truth, you know, the part that Elder Cook did not tell you in General Conference. Prior to the Willie Company, those are two different companies, by the way. They joined for this trip. Prior to the Willie Company departing Omaha, that's winter's quarters, the company met to debate if they should continue the journey immediately or wait for the spring. They should have waited for the spring. Because the immigrants were unfamiliar with the trail and the climate, they deferred to the returning missionaries and church agents. One of the returning missionaries, oh, this is Levi Savage, so he's a returning missionary, urged them to spend the winter in Nebraska. He warned them that they could not travel with a mixed company of aged people, women, and little children so late in the season without much suffering, sickness, and death. Yeah, this is what they were told. All of the other church elders, this is Wikipedia, all of the other church elders argued that the trip should go forward, expressing optimism that the company would be protected by divine intervention. Some members of the company, perhaps as many as 100, decided to spend the winter in Omaha, Nebraska, or in Iowa. In other words, they were going to go next year. But the majority, about 404 in number, including Savage, continued the journey west. The Willie Company left Omaha on August 17th, and the Martin Company on August 27th. So they leave 10 days apart, but you see how late in the season they're leaving. 2 ox wagon trains, etc., follow the Martin Company. Now, near Wood River in Nebraska, they're still in Nebraska, a herd of bison caused the Willie Company's cattle to stampede, and nearly 30 cattle were lost. Okay. Left without enough cattle to pull all of the wagons, each handcart was required to take on an additional 100 pounds of flour. They can't put it in the wagon. They can't transport it in the wagon dragged by the cattle, which got stampeded, they lost the cattle. So now the people are going to have to carry the flour, an extra 100 pounds on top of what they already have in their hand cart. They're still in Nebraska. In early September, which really is only a couple of weeks later, right? They left in late August. In early September, Richards, now this is Franklin D. Richards. You may want to remember that name. I know you've heard it before, but you'll remember it in a different context now. Franklin D. Richards, returning from Europe, where he had served as the church's mission president, passed the immigrant companies. He's an apostle. Franklin D. Richards counseled the immigrants to be faithful and obedient to their leaders and promised that the Lord would open a way for them to get to Zion in safety. That's an apostle telling them this. This is early on. They still got plenty of time to turn back. They're not even out of Nebraska, I believe. Franklin D. Richards and the 12 returning missionaries who accompanied him traveled in carriages and light wagons. So that's how they pass them, right? Because these guys are pulling handcarts, for crying out loud. These guys are in light wagons and carriages. Yeah, they're going a lot faster. So they pass them. They say, you're going to be fine. Everything's going to be great. You'll get to Zion in safety. And they traveled in carriages and light wagons pulled by horses and mules. And they went and they pressed on to Utah ahead of these people, right? So the deal was this, okay? The deal was this, is my understanding, is that then as Franklin D. Richards and his company is heading to Utah, the snow starts falling and he realizes this company is going to be in bad shape. So he is the one who gets there and he's the one who tells Brigham Young and everybody. And that's why they end up sending out the rescue companies later on in early October, General Conference time, to go rescue them. But in spite of that, that was not correct. They were not safe. And here is something from a book review in the Denver Post from a few years back by Sandra Dallas. Dallas is her last name, in the Denver Post. This is from 2016, and it's reviewing a book called Devil's Gate, Brigham Young and the Great Mormon Handcart Tragedy. It's by David Roberts, but the review is by Sandra Dallas. And I just want to read a couple of paragraphs from this so you'll understand what happened. The reality was that poor planning and irrational decisions, even stinginess, doomed the handcart scheme from the outset. The carts were made of green wood, which means they split and broke as the pioneers pushed them across the prairies and mountains. Most of the converts were not used to the strenuous work required to propel a loaded cart over hundreds of miles. And because Brigham Young claimed the handcarts would cross in just 2 months, he provided for no supply stations along the route. Planning was so poor, in fact, that officials in Salt Lake did not even know how many handcart companies were stranded in the mountains in 1856. The most devastating decision was to allow the immigrants to leave late in the season. They should have been on the road in May or June. Remember, they don't get out of there until August. Instead, the ill-fated Willie and Martin companies left in August. One arrogant church official who castigated anyone who, by the way, I believe this was Franklin D. Richards that they're referring to here. One arrogant church official who castigated anyone who suggested the last two companies wait until spring, and who later zipped past them in his light wagon, yep, sounds like Franklin D. Richards, promised there would be no snow. He declared he'd eat every snowflake the pioneers encountered. In fact, there was snow, as we all know. Thick and heavy and cold, and it all but buried the two parties of immigrants as they made their way through the mountains. The few wagons accompanying the trains could not handle the sick and feeble, so the infirm were piled on top of their handcarts and pushed by exhausted families. Some crawled along on their knees through the snow because their feet were frozen. Dozens died. A dozen or more on some nights. Over and over again, the first-hand accounts tell of pioneers waking up in the morning next to frozen bodies. Many immigrants succumbed from starvation because the organizers had underestimated the amount of food the pioneers would require. The head of one company ordered the immigrants to lighten their loads, thereby depriving them of blankets and clothing that might have saved their lives. Then he ordered the abandoned articles burned, lest their owners return to retrieve them. Well, I guess it really is Zion or bust, isn't it? A number of converts who survived nevertheless lost limbs to frostbite. Okay, that's the end of that review of the Devil's Gate that I'm going to read to you, or the end of the portion I'm going to read to you. It is really amazing that Elder Cook doesn't tell us about that. Elder Ricardo Himenez of the 70 now speaks to us. It's kind of a basic Mormon General Conference talk, although he does say, and it's one of his main themes, that a personal relationship with the Savior. He actually talks about a personal relationship with the Savior, but he does make it clear that that is not going to be enough to get you where you want to go in the next world. You also have to have the Mormon Church. So it's Jesus plus Mormonism equals exaltation. Jesus is not enough. It is kind of funny, though, that Elder Himenez says we need more than just a personal relationship with Jesus. When you compare it with what Bruce R. McConkie said, that we shouldn't even seek to have a personal relationship with Jesus. So now it's okay to have a personal relationship with Jesus. We just need the Mormon Church on top. Back in Elder McConkie's day, no personal relationship with Jesus, just the Mormon Church and Heavenly Father, to be fair. The choir sings another beautiful number, and now we're down to the last speaker. Let's see, we're at 41 minutes. I think I'm doing okay, time-wise. I don't want to go over an hour on this. Elder Henry B. Eyring now speaks as the conclusion. He is sitting in his high-back red velvet plush chair, so he doesn't even make it to the pulpit. And at this point, I begin to discern a kind of hierarchy of infirmity among the general authorities. Number one, you can be at the lectern, and Elder Cook was at the lectern standing there. Number two, Elder Oaks, he was at the lectern, but he wasn't standing. He was sitting on the black bar stool at the lectern. Number three, you could be sitting in your red chair, so you can't even make it to the lectern, but you are going to be there and you are going to speak, so you're going to just sit there. You don't even get up, okay? Don't want a chance to walking to the lectern. Might not be prudent. So Elder Eyring, sitting in your red chair without getting up at all. And number four, finally, we have President Nelson, who just doesn't show up. He's not there at all. And according to Elder Oaks, he's at home watching the proceedings. I'm sure if he's able to watch the proceedings, he's watching the proceedings. So with Elder Henry B. Eyring, we get his usual cavalcade of Mormon bumper sticker memes. He does this all the time. And his talks kind of go here and there. It's not always easy to figure out exactly what the point is, but it's all about good things and about Mormonism. Here he talks about drawing closer to Jesus. And throughout his talk, he gives different examples of how it is we can draw closer to Jesus, which is, of course, doing all the things we're supposed to do as good Mormons. That's how we draw closer to Jesus in Mormonism. And occasionally he'll tell a few stories from his life to illustrate different ideas about this. He says we should draw closer to Jesus by doing all the things good Mormons are supposed to do. He lists them: prayer, serving others, simple acts of obedience to the commandments. And he tells a story of himself when he was a young boy over 75 years ago. And he's at a sacrament meeting. They're holding it at night. They sing, "Abide with me, 'tis eventide." It's a nice song. He feels closer to Jesus through it, and he wants to share that story with us. But then he comes to another story, right? Another story which is closer in time, which is also related to the first story, because now he's reading the scriptures, because reading the scriptures is another way to draw closer to Jesus in Mormonism. Well, he's reading the story, right, in Luke about the two disciples on the road to Emmaus after Jesus has died, and Jesus shows up and walks along with them, and they don't recognize him. I think we all know the story. He told it in some detail. And he says that as he was reading the story from the scriptures, he felt the same feeling he felt as a young boy when he was singing the song Abide With Me 'Tis Eventide, which is based on the same passage. So reading the scriptures draws us closer to Jesus. Now, in time, after doing all the things a good Mormon is supposed to do, you will come to know the Savior and be like him. Many of you, I bolded this. I thought this was really noteworthy. Here's what President Eyring says. Many of you have loved ones who are straying from the path. So he's going to talk to your family members. If you are out there and you're not going to church anymore, he's talking to your family members. He's talking to your mom and dad, your brothers and sisters, maybe your kids, maybe your friends. But he's going to address them on your behalf and about you. He says, many of you have loved ones straying from the path. You wonder what more you can do to bring them back. What can they do to bring us back? Well, here's what President Eyring says. You can depend on the Lord to draw closer to them as you serve him in faith. I'm pretty sure I got this down right. His promise is that if you're a member of the church and you got kids who are straying or whatever straying, then Jesus will draw closer to them as you do what you're supposed to do as a good Mormon, as you serve him in faith, which gives the strange and odd result that, and I'm talking to you right now, he's talking to your parents or whoever it is who's in the church. I'll talk to you who may not be going to church. So the message from Elder Eyring to you is that if you don't want your TBM parents or children, if you don't want your TBM parents or children to double down in their faithfulness, I guess you better go back to church. I think that's what that boils down to. Because he's telling them, look, if you want Jesus to draw near to them, you're going to have to double down here and really get serious about your Mormonism. And if you don't want your family to do that, there's one way to avoid it, and that's go back to church. Checkmate, President Eyring. So the choir sings, Come, Come, Ye Saints, and that is, I believe, the end of the Saturday morning session of General Conference. Once again, if you haven't already, please go to radiofreemormon.org, click the donate button, make a donation today to Radio Free Mormon. This is the Radio Free Mormon General Conference telethon, where we're seeking to raise money to find a cure for Mormonism. So the next General Conference session is going to start in about an hour and 15 minutes. And in 3 hours and 15 minutes, it should be over, which will be my cue to come back on live and talk to you about what amazing things happen in the Saturday afternoon session of General Conference. What is this? Now, how did this happen? Michelle Murray, thank you so much. We got a $20 special chat, super chat. And she says, here's to your super chat goal and my donation also posted in donor box. Thank you so much, Michelle. Thanks for doing this all week in RFM so that we don't have to. Yeah. Well, somebody's got to do it. It's a dirty job, but somebody's got to do the General Conference review, and I guess it fell to me. Thanks again, Michelle. Thanks for everybody. When I say, look at this showing up, I didn't put this up here, okay? There's nobody here but me, but this didn't show up by itself, so I suspect Bill had something to do with this. Thank you, Bill. Thank you for everything you're doing. Thank you for everybody for watching, and I hope you have a great weekend while I'm slogging through General Conference. So I think that's about it for now. I will see you later. And in about 3 hours and 15 minutes. See you then.